Keynotes are very similar to material tags in Revit, with a few distinct differences. To begin with, you can see that I've created 4 walls with a new section view, and the wall type I used is an exterior brick and CMU on metal stud. Keynotes are used to reference materials and assemblies within your project. To begin with, let's look at the section view of this building. I'm going to change the scale here so we can see the materials a little bit closer. And we'll zoom in into the wall and the roof assembly. We can see that the roof is a wood rafter 8-inch with asphalt shingle and insulated roof. If we go to the Annotate tab, we can see here on the end, or near the end, the keynotes. And as you select the keynote dropdown, you can see that there are several different types. An element keynote, which references an entire assembly, like an entire wall or an entire roof assembly. The material keynote, which actually references each individual material. And a user-defined keynote, which allows you to, one time only, for every time you use this one, you can create your own user-defined keynote. The keynote that is most similar to the material tag is the material keynote. So let's start with that one. When you select the material keynote, as you hover over each different material, Revit will ask you, once you select that material, to pick from a big list the material that it is pointing to. Let's start with the brick. We'll left click, and one last drag and left click. And when we get to the very last click and we're about to place this keynote, we get this dialog box. This references a file that lists all of the different materials that you might use on a project. And Revit forces you to select from this list what material you're pointing at. You can modify this list with more materials or even keynotes, actual notes. And many firms or businesses have their own standard for these keynotes. This allows a big firm with many draftsmen to use the exact same language for every keynote. Let's continue with our bricks. Our keynote is pointing to this brick, so we will find the brick that we want to use in this list. We'll go to masonry here, and we'll go to the clay unit masonry, and we can pick any brick here, about a standard brick with a 3/8" joint. And you can see that this list is quite robust in the amount of materials that it lists. Once we select that keynote or that material, it labels it. And now, wherever in our project we place that keynote, whether it's in a floor plan or an elevation, if it's pointing to that brick, we'll get the same keynote. We can do the same thing for the roof shingles. Here we go, shingles, and we can just put asphalt shingles. And maybe we'll do one last one for the CMU block down at the base of the wall. Again, once you've finished that tag, you have to pick from this dialog box the material that you want to use. As you can see, Revit creates these keynotes with numbers. These numbers reference the CSI format for architectural materials. If we highlight the keynote tag, we can change the type to a keynote number, which is without the box, We can do a large box or a small box. And lastly, we can actually do it with text. So we can make these keynotes in any form or those forms that we wish. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to the numbers. And the nice thing about keynotes, or material tags for that matter, is once you have modeled your building in Revit and you're ready to start detailing it, once you've set up the keynotes correctly, then all of your detailing and your sections go very quickly as far as labeling. You can get a sense of that by just coming in here. We can do the brick on this side. I was trying to get to the roof here. There we go, there's the roof. And you can see how fast this might go once you have all your drawing views set up and you start creating the keynotes. Let's take a look at the other two types of keynotes. One is the element keynote, and this is the entire assembly. If we come into this wall, if we point at the brick or the air gap or the stud or even down at the block, because it's an entire wall assembly, it doesn't matter where we're pointing to, it will always read the same. So if we select in the middle, we need to pick what we're going to say. And this is where we might not use Revit's predefined file. This is where a firm might create their own keynotes, and it might be an assembly or a wall definition that explains that it's brick with an air gap over a steel stud and chipboard on the interior. For now, let's just do a generic masonry division 4, just as a placeholder, since we don't have any custom keynotes. But you can see that no matter where this arrow points, it's still going to say division 4 because it's talking about the entire assembly. As opposed to this keynote, which we use for the material, if it points to a different material, it changes. We haven't defined the air gap or the steel stud, which is why we see the question mark. If we wanted to keep it there and define the steel stud, we would just click on the question mark and get the drop-down menu. And we can go to the Division 5 metals, and we can find the cold form metal framing, or actually the structural metal stud framing, and 6-inch metal stud, and there you go. And now, whether we're in floor plan, section, or elevation, if that steel stud is visible, we can label it with a keynote. Likewise, we can also do our element keynote since we've already defined that. The last keynote we can take a look at is the user-defined. This allows us to create a new keynote, even if one keynote has been defined for either a material or an assembly. This will overwrite it just for this one time, each time we use the user-defined keynote. So it's pointing to the same thing as both of these, but we were able to overwrite it for this one time. Those are for special instances when you need to add a custom remark or a custom keynote for that area. The last thing we'll take a look at for keynotes is putting it on the sheet with a keynote legend. So let's go ahead and right-click in our project browser on Sheets so we can get a new title block. We'll go ahead and bring our section view on here just for reference. And maybe we can even fit our floor plan on. So we have our keynotes. Well, now we probably need a legend so we can tell whoever's looking at our drawings what these numbers actually mean. If we go to the View tab, we can create a new keynote legend here. Keynote legend will be the name, that's fine. And there's only two topics or two subjects that we can use, the key value and the keynote text. If we hit OK, Revit will compile all the keynotes that we have created so far into a list. And it will list the key value, or the number of the keynote, and next to it it'll explain what it actually is. Once we've created the legend, we can drag that legend onto our sheet so people know what materials are being called out by what numbers. And that is keynoting.